Lose yourself in a good book. The Bord Gáis Energy Book Club.
Now, Strumpet City by James Plunkett is our book club choice for April, and it marks the centenary of the lockout of trade unionists by employers in 1913, on which the book is based.
The lockout was a pivotal event in Irish social history, and historian Pádraig Yates joins us now to tell us more about it. Pádraig, you're very welcome to the show this morning. Pádraig, we had O'Casey writing about the slums and the working class, we had Joyce writing about the middle class, Plunkett wanted to write about both, and the lockout is where the two kind of were at loggerheads very much.
Yeah, it's an amazing achievement because you'd naturally think 1916 would be the thing to focus on, or the War of Independence, a lot more drama in some ways. But yeah, the lockout was the great novel of the last century. I think, obviously other people might disagree, but it was a tremendous achievement, and it was written in his spare time. Most of the time he was writing and working for the other station, RTE, and driven fairly hard. And he was writing it at night and apparently finding it very difficult.
But this was something that was very dear to his heart.
Yes, I know. He grew up in Irish Town. He worked for the Workers' Union. He worked actually in the same office, I think, as
Jim Larkin.
Jim Larkin. Right. So he knew the man, and of course he knew all the people. He was born in 1920, so he knew people growing up. I mean, I'm a lot younger than that, although I may not look it. But you know, I mean, when I was growing up, there were still people around, including my own parents, who were only born at the time of the lockout, but had all the story or the folk memory. And that was around, I suppose, until the 1980s. It's gone now, unfortunately. But it was very important at the time.
It's very interesting that we're discussing this the day after the death of Margaret Thatcher, the woman who effectively broke the British trade union movement, and we're talking about the lockout, which was effectively, I suppose, the proper birth of the Irish trade union movement. And it is interesting to see the difference in terms of how trade unions are perceived now, how they were perceived back then, what they were originally set up for and intended to do, and of course what it is they actually do now. So, I mean, as a historian, give us your perspective on that. I mean, do you think Larkin would be, and indeed James Plunkett, would be horrified if they looked at the trade union movement now and saw where it has come to?
Well, I think it's very complicated. I mean, we've always been trade unions. I mean, in ancient Egypt, the slaves would retreat into the marshes, you know, because I suppose trade unions were established originally for all sorts of reasons. One was skilled craft workers, and skilled craft workers were the backbone of the Irish trade union movement until Larkin came along. Larkin's great achievement was to organise the unskilled and the semi-skilled.
Well, of course, the craft unions were effectively cartels, weren't they? That was a form of protectionism.
Yes.
But that excluded anyone who wasn't a skilled worker per se.
Absolutely, yes. And Larkin broke through that barrier. And he did it because he had a message, a vision of the future. Now, many people dissent from it, but it was a socialist vision. He wanted the wealth of the country to belong to the people of the country. And it is true, I think, that trade unions today have become, again, reverted, if you like, more and more to representing skilled people. And I think I think there's two reasons for that. One is that unions have retreated in the face of an offensive by the employers, and we tend to forget it now, but the lockout was actually an employer's offensive to smash Larkin's union. And to be honest, I think they would have succeeded if it hadn't been for the First World War. The British government then said, well, we actually need industrial peace, so we're going to give unions a place in society. We're going to let them represent people. And if you look at both Britain and Ireland in the period after that, unions grew enormously. If you look now at the modern period, people like Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan really created the world we live in, which I think is a harsher place and a more dangerous place than, say, the world I grew up in after the Second World War. But part of that was deconstructing trade unions. And whether we like it or not, for a lot of ordinary people, the only way you can actually improve your lot in life is to secure an improvement in your wages and conditions.
Well, of course, see, trade unions were founded on an idea of socialism, and maybe the way to kill the trade unions was to get them to convert to capitalism, which is effectively what's happened.
Absolutely, I'd agree with you entirely there. They have lost sight of any long-term, it doesn't have to be socialist, but a vision of creating a better society. And that's something that Plunkett captures in his book, not in a preachy way or propagandist way, but simply showing what people's lives were like.
And it was pretty awful, Pádraig, back then, wasn't it? We had the worst slums in Europe.
Oh, we did. I mean, the death rate in Dublin was about 50% higher than it was in London. It was as high as it was in Moscow or Naples. And my father was in Naples in the Second World War, and he could say it was a pretty awful place to be, and that was a lot longer after that. But Dublin was an awful place to live, and one of my worries is that we have a huge number of young people now who are effectively excluded from the labour market because they don't have the skills to enter it, who are being casualised, who are in a situation where there are no unions to represent them because employers are not obliged to recognise them. So there are a lot of echoes today with 1930.
Yeah, there is resonance, isn't there? Actually, it's the first time I've ever read the book, and it's been really informative to me, because I wasn't really taught an awful lot about that period in school, so it's very interesting.
But it's an interesting part as a historian, when you get a large, marginalised and by and large educated, disgruntled young populace, and they've got no hope and no jobs, what's that? What is that the seeds of?
Revolution, of course.
I wanted you to say that rather than me.
Are you calling for a Pork?
Well, not yet.
Not yet.
It could be on the way then.
OK, Pork.
Thank you,
very
Pork.
much
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Now, as we have just been discussing, Strumpet City is the Bord Gáis Energy Book Club choice for April and is this year's choice for One City, One Book. If you would like to be in with the chance of winning a stylish BlackBerry playbook, then simply send your review of this classic to us here at Ireland AM.
Now, a review should be no longer than 50 words and should reach us by Friday the 26th of April. They should be emailed to irelandm@tv3.ie or sent by post to Bord Gáis Energy Book Club, TV3, Westgate Business Park, Ballymount, Dublin 24. You can also enter through the website, which is tv3.ie/book club. Just quickly before we go, Porrick is giving story songs, lectures and speeches on Friday the 12th of April at 1 p.m. in the Jervis Centre and around Mary Street, and also Saturday the 13th of April.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now, let's
Lose yourself in a good book. The Bord Gáis Energy Book Club.